Good morning, Texas. We're live right now. Oh, you know what? I forgot to bring my little PowerPoint thing up. So I'm going to do that while Erik Nylen's introducing himself. We have a fantastic day planned. I think there's about a dozen really good speakers, and we only have 2 hours. And two of these people I got one-on-ones with. So we're going to try to get through this fast but meaningful, get you all the information you need. If you're on right now and you can find the chat room, click on the chat room and say hello to everybody so that we can start to interact with each other, because I miss being live. I don't know about you, Erik, but I love live events, and I'm getting kind of tired of sitting in my basement and doing these Zoom calls. But it's the best we've got. We can roll with it. We're doing the best with what we got. Why don't you real quick, there we go. We got hi from Jen to all panelists. So if you go in this is a Zoom lesson for everybody when you're on webinars. If you're in the chat room, there's a drop-down menu and who you're going to send it to. If you want to send it to everybody that's watching, you have to click that drop-down button. Make sure you send it not to just all panelists, but all panelists and all viewers. So the couple hellos I've gotten just now are just Erik and I, which is fine. We're saying hello. All right, Erik, do us a quick introduction. Tell us, Erik's a principal with Beacon Hospitality Advisors. They got their finger on the pulse of what's going on in hospitality, but tell us a little bit more about your company and background.
Sure. Beacon Hospitality Advisors, basically we help lenders with distressed hotel assets. As I think everybody may be aware, hotels are a unique piece of real estate in that they're also an operating business, and every day is a new day. And an opportunity to either hold value, gain value, or lose value. And oftentimes, an owner's interests aren't necessarily aligned with the lenders, and they're making decisions that always are in the best interest of the lender. So we help lenders both on the, you could say, on the loan side, and then if they have to take a property back. And we have over 30 years, principals have over 30 years of experience in basically all facets of the business, from ownership, real estate, brand, management, lending side. There isn't a side we haven't basically been on. So we can really approach this from a holistic standpoint and how to preserve value and oftentimes enhance value. And that's what it's really all about for the lenders, is how to get out of this as whole as they can, or maybe actually better than whole. So, and then we also have a sister company, EMA Lodging Group, that owns hotels. So we currently own 6 hotels. So we also know what owners are going through in this time and can bring that perspective.
So I'm in a weird spot, Erik. I get to interview people that are happy, the industrial folks, like, hey, this pandemic's not so bad. We're bursting at the seams. Some markets have 1% vacancy. I bet you'd love to have that in a hotel, huh? But other people, I think Ryan Severino, our kind of home economist here, says it's K-shaped recovery. There's people doing well. There's people not doing so well. Hotels has to be the one that's hit the hardest. But so just, I want to take a chronological approach. I hope you're okay with that. Let's just start with a picture of today. There has to have been some kind of recovery, right? But where are we at right now in the hospitality industry?
Yeah, there's been recovery. I mean, you're seeing, I think, industry-wide occupancies in the low 40s now. I think, again, that's a huge, normal is high 60s. And then that's an amalgamation of the whole country. So sometimes you have to pull New York out because, New York is in a world of hurt. And it's so market specific, it's really hard. So, I mean, the industry was hit hard. It has come back from the really worst and dark days of late March, early April. But it's sort of plateaued now, which is not unexpected given the seasonality of the end of the year and school being back in a lot of places and that sort of thing.
So we've got a ways to go, though. 40% to high 60s is a big range. And I have to assume, I've never been in the hospitality business, but I used to be a CPA, so I understand finances a little bit. That's where all your, I mean, if you run at 55%, 60%, you're running at an operating loss, right? And that's when you talk about lenders and operators might be thinking of things differently.
Well,
what are the strategies? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I've been through quite a lot of these downturns back. I date myself all the way back to the RTC days in the early 90s. Resolution Trust Corp, which was a huge crash. But everyone's different. This one is different in that for lenders, the hotels aren't even positive at the operating level, let alone throwing any money to debt service. So as a lender, why do you want to take an asset back that you would have to feed? And as long as the owner is feeding the operating losses, then you may not be getting your debt service, but at least you're not having to pay it. So it is really different that way. And again, there's a broad spectrum of hotel types. You know, lower break evens at the select service economy model, the extended stay, versus the big box stuff. And you know, the big box hotels have been hit the hardest because they have the highest fixed costs. It's all about fixed costs. In select service, you could bring staffing down to as low as 2 people per shift.
That makes good sense. So, okay, then I've got a lot of questions about how we get from here. We know we're not in a good place, and how we get out of this, winners, losers, and what the timing from your perspective kind of looks like. So, how far do we have to get close to that high 60s? And then what's that projection? What is the industry thinking? Is it a couple years? I mean, I've heard people say new normal, things aren't going to be, what is it? Bill Gates came out and said, business travel will be cut by 50%. I think he's crazy. Maybe he cuts his travel by 50%, but what is your group thinking and what's the industry thinking?
Yeah, I actually believe that, you know, and everything I hear anecdotally, people I know and read, people want to travel. And we saw that before. You saw the crazy over tourism in the world. That hasn't stopped. It's only accelerated. It stopped during this period, but I think people want to return to that as soon as they can. I do, my family does, all my friends do. I don't think people are going to stop traveling either for work or for pleasure. It will take time. Leisure travel is what's supporting us right now. It's really what's missing from our business mix is business travel and groups and conventions. That's the huge hole. So it's the group and conventions that probably take the longest to recover. There's no transparency yet on how quickly that will come back. As soon as we have a vaccine, how long does it take to ramp up? How careful are people going to be? It's probably, frankly, 22 to 23 before you really see I think, return to group business. Leisure has been there. You'll have even more leisure. Right now, we don't have international, so the international gateway cities are highly impacted. New York, LA, San Francisco. That's going to take a while to come back. I think locations that are drive-to, domestic, easy to get to, and we're seeing that right now. I mean, the Napas, the Myrtle Beaches, the markets that you can drive to are jammed on weekends. The mountain towns of Colorado, all those are doing well. They're missing the midweek business, you know, that again, group and stuff that support those locations. But it's really, I think next year is going to be a tale of two halves. First part of the year is it's still uncertainty, you know, coming out of it as a vaccine, which we're all sort of counting on now, gets distributed. Second half will accelerate, and we won't fully recover probably to 23. Some people think 24, but I think 23. I think there's a lot of pent up demand. You got to remember, people postpone weddings, other events. There's a lot of people that are looking to rebook those as soon as we can. Hotel companies still have a lot of bookings. People haven't canceled yet for next year, and they're hoping and they're hanging on and trying to they want those events. They're going to cancel them if they have to, but they want to hold them.
I am with you on tale of two halves next year. So we're kind of in the hospitality business, right? Red News and RE Journals, we do events, live events. We were supposed to do 102 live events this year. So we touch a lot of hospitality, and I'm looking at it. I'm also the company CFO, that we're going to, at the middle of the year, things are going to kind of come back gangbusters, but that segment of the population that is still, they're not going to trust the vaccine. until they hear zero COVID numbers, they're not going anywhere. How big do you think that segment is? And is that what gets you to this 2023 date? Because I feel like the end of 21 we would be back except for a small group of people.
Yeah, except the accelerator never goes from 0 to 100 that quickly. Most businesses coming out of recessions say, oh, everything looks good, but they don't take all the brakes off. They're usually cautious. We go with business, business travel. So they tend to restrict travel at first, then the brakes come off a little more, then they come off a little more. So it takes time and momentum. It just never like goes boom before things come back. So again, leisure, I think, will come back incredibly quick. But it's the other piece, the corporate travel, the group and convention travel that's going to take some time to accelerate.
So Bill Gates might have been onto something or on something. I don't know.
In the short term, I don't disagree. I don't agree that it's human nature. People want to travel. They want to socialize. We see that now, even in the face of personal danger. There's a large segment of the population that still wants to do this. They want to go to bars and all that stuff. So I don't think that changes. Every downturn I've been through, there's all these predictions of, like, my favorite one is luxury is dead. I've heard that in every downturn, not this one, but previous. Luxury is dead. It'll never come back. Every downturn, it comes back bigger, faster, and sooner than ever before. So that's human nature. People want it. That's not gonna change. So I think travel is the same way. I think you've got a younger generation here who's brought up in travel. They want to travel. They want to travel more. They don't like being cooped up. They'll pay for experiences, and travel is a big experience.
That was a demographic shift that was occurring prior to COVID, right? So
Right.
My children's generation are experience driven, and they don't want necessarily a big mortgage and a big house, but they might spend their disposable income on travel.
Right. And my kids are mid-20s, and yes, they're careful in this, but I can tell you this in some ways is not stopping them. And as soon as it comes off, I'm sure they're off to travel wherever they can.
Oh, I'm packing up. I have two 19-year-olds, 15-year-old. We're all going to Florida because the state I live in is closed. No gyms are open, no sports, no anything. So I'm with you. I'm ready to travel. Let's roll.
Yeah. And so you've seen that. I did the same. I rented a house in Santa Barbara because my kids are in LA for a month. So we stayed safe in place, but we had outdoors, beaches, and there you get mountains and beaches. So
right.
It's pretty nice, and you could be safe, but it's a change of scenery. And that's what people have been doing.
So I kind of thought at the beginning, I know this is off topic, but Airbnb and VRBO, I thought they were going to get crushed in the pandemic, but it sounds like they've done okay.
Yeah, they actually have. And again, you think about it, it makes sense. So a lot of them are in remote locations. You don't have to mix with people. There was concerns about cleanliness, but as those have reduced, meaning like CDC has come out and said it's pretty much very difficult to catch this from anything but respiratory. That's eased people's concerns. But I think the main thing is you can rent a house, you can have all your meals there, you can be in the wilderness with nobody around and not have to interact with other people, and you can get away.
So that's a great segue, Erik. I love that you brought us to my next point is the changes in hospitality, cleanliness, location, style. Are people looking for the hotel hospitality experience? Even especially business travelers, are they going to use the gym, or are they going to find a way to work out in their room? Or do they have new expectations? I know we have temporary changes. What do those maybe look like? But then how do we project that out going forward?
Yeah, certainly on a temporary basis. So my view of this is there's certainly been a lot of short-term changes to meet this situation, both on an operating side, on a labor model, and what the hotels are offering. We're all looking to reduce costs as much as possible, given reduced revenues. Cleanliness and sanitation protocols are have been upped, and I think that's a good thing. That's actually been an underlying concern. I can't tell you how many people I know who say they won't step on the carpet in a hotel in their bare feet and stuff like that. So I think it's something the industries need to address anyway, and this has only accelerated it. So I think there's a lot of short-term changes. What hangs on long-term is harder to sort of tease out. I think a couple things. I think you see acceleration of technology, things like keyless entry, not having to get a key at the desk, things like room automation, so you don't have to touch the remote, you don't have to touch the thermostat, you can do it all from your device. I think, these are things that were happening pre-COVID. COVID is now accelerating the need for them, and owners can see a reason to invest in it. I think you see, for the most part, continuing trends. You may see, automation in terms of robots and stuff like that. That was happening pre-COVID anyway. This may accelerate it. The indoor-outdoor use of spaces, outdoor dining, cafes, setting up more spaces outdoors. That was happening anyway, because that's what people wanted. This is just accelerating it and placing a bigger value on it. There will be changes in some of the service models and food and beverage models, but at the end of the day, people want to go to bars. They want to go to restaurants. So I think eventually it'll migrate back to where it was. And we have this, we're famous in the hotel industry during these periods, we cut back, and there's always, when things are good, things keep getting added on. And then you need these periods oftentimes to reset the baseline. And then over the next 5 years, things will get added back on in terms of free breakfast or more offerings or all that sort of thing. So I'm not clear how much of this grab and go. I think people want options. I think that's the one thing that will. Though people don't want to mix, and they'll want to be able to get food in the room. And we pretty much cut out room service, pretty much all the hotels. But now you can get something DoorDash, you can go third party, or you can get a really nice product delivered to your room in a really nice paper bag. Jean Georges, a great restaurateur, does this at a hotel, started this at a Hotel Public in Chicago, even 5-8 years ago, delivering great room service in a paper bag. And it was terrific meals, better than the normal room service.
The first paper bag experience I had at a hotel was not pleasant. They were, overripe bananas and a bottle of juice, and here you go off. Good morning. Off you go. Where's my hot breakfast?
Yeah, no, I get that. But there's a lot of breakfasts at hotels you don't want to eat anyway. So
there you go. Yeah, good point. I miss traveling. All right, I have to apologize real quick. I'm going to just step away while you talk, but I've got my headphones on. I can hear you and I can talk to you. I got to replace the battery. I got a new camera that has a battery.
Sure.
But tell me real quick, for everybody here. So the next thought that a lot of people have, a lot of our listeners are waiting to see, are there going to be buying opportunities? I think a lot of people felt like the last recession had a lot of blessings towards the end where people could pick up distressed assets, recapitalize, do some things to re-energize and create profits and returns for the future. So are we going to see some distressed hotel opportunities? If so, when? What do they look like?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. It's one we're all asking ourselves. And I think, yes, it's never these days as quick. Like back in the RTC days, the government basically seized the savings and loans. The guillotine came down and they opened up the for sale window. We don't have that type of major event anymore. In 08, we called it, the Fed allowed banks to pretend and extend. We still have some of that going on. Banks certainly know, and we all know that if there isn't an event and you can hold on and work out, you'll end up with more value. So there will be assets coming out. There's been a lot of forbearance. And like I said, lenders really don't want to take assets back right now that are in a negative operating cash flow. So we're all kind of waiting for when a shoe might drop. And best guess is you'll start to see forbearance burn off at the end of the year, and banks trying to figure out what to do, and lenders, and it really depends what situation the lenders are in. Do they have to, or are they balance sheet lenders, and can they hang on? Because if they can hang on, they know they'll have more value at the end of the day. So yes, but it's difficult. And then there's another piece is private equity have figured out that they can make pretty darn good returns with rescue capital. So they can sort of bypass the whole foreclosure process, taking assets back. If they can inject capital into existing partnerships and with owners that need help and take a preferred position, they can carve out some pretty nice returns and take out all that risk that goes along with foreclosure or bidding on foreclosed assets and all this. So I think there's going to be a significant amount of capital in the rescue area. And these assets may never even come to market in that period. So I think there's next year is going to be interesting to see how much really comes out and how much is distressed. Or like last time, there was opportunities, but it was later in the cycles as the buy and the sell side got a little closer together. There's a huge spread still in the buy and the sell right now. What I see come out, and there's not a lot, the owners think they're going to get a lot of money for it. And of course, as buyers, we can't even approach it without a significant discount. So there's a big disconnect right now in the market. So
yeah, there's got to be the spread is going to be there for a while, I think, just because why would you sell unless you're being forced to sell?
Right.
And like you said, you're coaching lenders to say, hey, don't be so quick to take this back. There might be reasons to let it simmer for a while.
Right. Or, if you take it back, you need to understand what you're doing. And there's some, and CMBS is a whole different ball of wax because that's a security. It's governed by documents. They have a process they have to go through. So that's a little different. But we're all hoping there's a tremendous amount of capital being raised around purchase of distressed assets. And this happened in 08 too. And frankly, they were having trouble putting that money out in 08. It wasn't.
I can
really
see
good.
that repeating. Can't you see that repeating? It's going to be a challenging marketplace.
Yeah,
but I like what you said about the equity injections. What asset classes are the most likely to need that or willing to accept some equity, new equity, which means bad things for the current equity, right?
Well,
and potentially
in the old days, we used to call them hope notes. In other words, you as an owner, you had two choices. You could either give your asset back to the bank and lose everything you have in it, or you could bring in new equity put yourself in the back seat of the car, and hope that things turned around enough in a couple of years that and values increased enough that you got some money out, and some was better than none. So I don't know if there's a particular asset class. There is. I mean, right now in our industry, long-term stay, the residence inns, extended stays, they're doing pretty well because their business hasn't gone away. It's contract workers, it's people working on roadways and bridges and these big construction projects. So they're actually doing pretty good. Economy's doing pretty well comparatively. The one, most of the hotels were closed were big box hotels, group hotels that have high fixed costs. They're the ones probably in the most world of hurt. Select service will come back faster. They're smaller, by the way. Select service tends to be 150 rooms or below, so they don't have as many rooms to fill. They're more short-term business, and then they're not relying on groups and that type of longer-term business. It's short-term bookings, so they'll come back sooner. So truthfully, the big question is, what do you do with all these big boxes with all this meeting space that are just bleeding red ink? And those are the ones that
have some real estate events. That's what we do. We get the industry together. I'll go to ICSC. Right. Man, Vegas has got to be hurting, right? The conference capital of the U.S.
Right. Vegas, fortunately, it's shifted their model a bit away from such a heavy dependence on gambling to, it's become a huge entertainment capital. So depending on how open that is, but people traveling over from California and stuff on weekends to party is a huge piece of their business now.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, okay, we've got a few minutes left here. Let's start the Erik and Todd Distressed Hotel Fund. And I don't know the industry, so you're going to have to tell us, where are we going to, what are we looking for? What cities, markets, Texas specific, if there's some areas in Texas? What do we think? When is our timing, and what product type would you go after?
Okay. Yeah, I think, what in some ways, I don't think you change your investment parameters. I would stay away if your investment horizon is 5 years right now. Let's say we're looking to get out of the fund in 5 years. We're not long-term holders. I think I'd stay away from international gateways, because I think international travel is going to take a while to come back. I always like markets that have multiple sources of demand. So if it's heavily reliant on convention, not tourism, because tourism I think will be back really quickly, but those major convention events like San Antonio downtown, I think are going to take a while to come back. San Antonio's got really other good factors though, military, techs moving there from Austin because the cost of living is so much lower. It's got other good stuff going for it. So I think multiple sources of demand. I think Austin, again, with the technology base and everything going on there. I know it's got a heavy convention component, but I think Austin will bounce back quickly. We like San Antonio. I think Houston has a lot of strength. Certainly Dallas. Again, just HP just announced relocating their corporate headquarters to Dallas from California. Not a surprise. Given cost structures and everything. But so again, Texas I like markets with some barriers to entry too, where there's a lot of land and easy building and people can put up new stuff all the time. That scares me a little bit. So that's always been somewhat a problem in Texas, is growth tends to outstrip demand. So I'm always careful. I lost you.
Yeah, that's me. The guy who says you're muted 4 times a week is the one who doesn't unmute himself. The opposite, though, if you're in New York City and there's tons of barriers to entry, you also bring that COVID issue with too,
well,
right?
Again, and the one thing, so I like a Tampa St. Pete. I think that has a lot going to it, because it's got a leisure component, it's got a business component, it's got a lot going for it. I think the markets that will struggle are those major gateway cities, not only because of international travel, but they have some real, budget issues now. They have high fixed costs. New York and San Francisco, because of unions and other issues, tremendously high fixed costs. So it's really difficult in the short term to step in there and think you're gonna make a lot of money. Long term, I'd say I'm always a buyer of New York if I have that kind of money, low cost of capital that can wait. Because I think New York will come back. I don't think urbanization is dead. I think, again, it's just going to take longer for it to come back. And they have some real issues to deal with, and infrastructure and cost structure and all that stuff. So it wouldn't be my short-term target right now, I think I'd look for I like Denver. And certain markets in Denver, I like, those types of cities. I think are and certain cities in the Midwest. I mean, certainly secondary cities. I don't know. I go tertiary, but certainly secondary, good suburban locations in major urban markets, I think are all locations to look at.
We got like 30 seconds left. Which class level of hospitality would you dive into luxury at all, or would you say let's stick with bread and butter?
Luxury's tough, right? Because it's so much. There tend to be trophy buys and not return buys. And people who buy them for different reasons. And most of your value you create, you only get out when you sell at the right time. I think more bread and butter, select service, which is going to come back faster, has lower fixed costs, can pivot faster, would be my target in what we call compact full service, which is sort of a step above that, but it's not one of the big box full service hotels.
Love it. I got my playbook. So I'm building a pandemic playbook. Let's go.
Okay.
We're going into hospitality. No, just kidding. I'm going to stick to radio announcing or TV or internet, whatever you want to call it. Well, thanks, Erik. This was fantastic. I've got Ryan Walsh waiting in the wings. He's going to tell us about sports and when we're going to see a stadium full of people again. He uses crystal ball. Ryan, I hope you're listening and you're warming up that crystal ball. But go ahead and hit your webcam. Make sure we can see you and hear you. I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping items. Erik, thank you so much. Appreciate it. You can feel free to stay on. If you turn your camera and mic off, you can watch the rest of the event for free. There he is.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How have you been, my friend?
I'm good. I'm good. It's good to see you.
So I got to quickly do a little housekeeping. And so just hold tight for a second. I am not a pro at screen share or anything, but I think I've got this down. Okay, you should be seeing now our virtual lobby. Since we can't be live and we can't have a real lobby and hang out together and network, we got to stick with this. But this has all of our panelists and what they're going to talk about on it. So you see, I'm going to click on, there's our man, Ryan Walsh right there. What's his bio? Oh, I've got a LinkedIn button. Click on his LinkedIn button. You can learn more about him. You can also connect with him. So just because you can't connect in the hallway with somebody and exchange business cards, we have a solution. You just have to push the button and say hello that way. And then you can see the next panel we have coming up, a whole bunch of good panelists. Connect with all of them. Also, if you want to find out more about our sponsors, you can do that through here. Click on their ads or their pictures, and then you can see our upcoming events. So that's our virtual lobby. That should be up right now while you're looking at this, and feel free to use that. Feel free to reach out to me anytime you want. Okay, Ryan Walsh, let's rock and roll.
Absolutely. I'm going to share.
We talked, I've only been on one event with you, and it's the only time we've ever met. So I don't want everybody to think we're old friends like the sportscasters always say. It's a good old friend of mine. But I really appreciated the insight you had at the time, because it's the first time that I had heard somebody talk about, you got that going. Are you doing the screen share?
Yeah.
Okay, you were freaking me out for a second because I thought somebody controlled my computer. Okay. So, and you were the first person to start to talk about capacity limitations. And we were talking about the stadium and what it would be like with 25%, a third, 50%, and how you'd queue out lines and some of the precautions that you could take early in COVID. Now we're all comfortable with that. We're all sort of used to seeing the big circles on the floor, like stand here, knucklehead. You feel like you're kind of at kindergarten again because you have to go stand in your circle and don't get too close to me. You're on your own kind of circle here. But so if you've got a PowerPoint, let's go through this, but I want to hear an update on where your mind and the people you work with are thinking from that point in early April to today, and then what you see going forward. Because I think when we see a stadium full of people is when we're kind of out of this recession, or at least we see the light at the end of the tunnel. So help us out here and take away with your PowerPoint.
Definitely changed since April. And we'll talk about this here in a second, but as you go through these things, you learn more and more as time goes. And to the point you mentioned is at the beginning of any disaster, you get all this information fast and furious, and 90% of it's going to be wrong in 3 or 4 days. We all thought we were going to be out of this in a few months, and here we are almost a year later. So jump into it. Just for those who don't know me, my name's Ryan Walsh. I'm the executive director of the Harris County Sports and Convention Corporation, and we're the entity responsible for the operation, maintenance, and development of the 350-acre sports and entertainment complex called NRG Park. We have 4 facilities here, an NRG Stadium, 72,000-seat NFL retractable roof, NRG Center, more than 1 million square feet of exhibition, meeting, and office space, NRG Arena, which is a 5,200 fixed seat arena with surrounding exhibition halls, and of course the historic Astrodome. Don't ask about the Astrodome, it's still there. But we have 2 major tenants, the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo and the NFL Houston Texans. And on a typical game day, we have an operating staff of more than 4,000 people. And during the rodeo, for instance, more than 2.5 million visitors come through our gates for shopping, livestock shows, a professional rodeo, and concerts from some leading acts in the music industry. And in fact, since our opening in 2002, we've had more than 50 million people come through the gates of NRG Park. So, I mean, we're a very well-attended facility, very well used. So you can imagine that this period in our history is a very dark one, both physically and literally for us. And I was asked to speak to you all this morning regarding what will it take for fans to feel safe at sports arenas, and then a few other things, but I'm going to stick with this for the most part. You've got some great real estate experts on the other panels. I'm going to let them stick to their expertise, and real estate is certainly not mine, but like all of us, what we've been dealing with for the last 6 to 8 months is coronavirus. And as we started to realize that the COVID-19 pandemic was going to have an impact here in the United States, I don't think anyone, especially in our industry, realized just how profound that impact was going to be. Naturally, the first major group or industry to see those effects was going to be the public events and gathering facilities, including the sports leagues. How could we continue operating when our sole business model is mass gatherings and putting large crowds of people in close proximity? So our industry was the first to close, will likely be among the last to reopen. The pandemic has gutted the sports and entertainment industry. According to an ESPN article in May of this year, the financial impact of the loss of sports alone is more than $12 billion. And that doesn't take into account the entertainment side. The large touring companies like Feld Entertainment or other touring companies that produce the big concerts, they stand to lose just as much. And one thing that's often overlooked are the ancillary players in our industry, the smaller contractors and vendors, not to mention the part-time event staff like the ticket takers and the ushers and the food and beverage staff that you see. For many, this is one of several jobs they might have to make ends meet. So the service industry alone has been decimated. Some reports estimate that 70% of the staff of sports and entertainment venues have either been furloughed or laid off. So, I mean, it's a really big hit for us. And it's a staggering percentage. And, you know, obviously we've got to find a way to get back in the game, so to speak. At NRG Park, our facility operator is a group, ASM Global. They are just locally, they've furloughed or laid off almost 45% of their staff. And again, that doesn't include the part-time non-salaried staff. So in any part of a disaster, or in this case, a global pandemic, like I mentioned earlier, the information comes fast and furious. We attempt to respond the best way we know how, and with the best information we have at the time. For sports and entertainment venues, the initial response was to shut down. We've got to limit the people in our facilities and thereby limit the exposure to the virus. That was the only way that we could think to do it. The sports teams too were trying to figure out the best way to protect their most prized assets, their players. I mean, that's how they make their money. And the NBA created the bubble, the MLB did the same, and the NFL created their tier system that limited access to players and coaches to only those who absolutely had to be in contact. And we can see just from the news articles that we've seen over the last couple of weeks, it's not an infallible process. The virus is going to get you whether you're doing whatever you want to or not. So we've just got to take the absolute best precautions we can. And a large part of keeping the staff safe was to recreate the way we enter our facilities. For instance, at NRG Park, we've shut down all of our 12 access gates except for one. You can see a picture of the procedure there on the screen. At that entrance, you're only granted access if you have an employee badge or you're pre-registered for access. And once you arrive, you have your temperature taken. You have to successfully answer the questionnaire of 5 questions. PPE is required for all the staff in some degree, whether it's just a face covering or a face mask. In some areas, we have hand shields where has a little plexiglass with a handle on it and they hold it up in front of the person. But for everybody coming into the building, face coverings are required. That's whether you're inside the building or out. You know, from all indications at the beginning of this, we thought it was going to be just a few months. You know, we thought, all right, we'll get through this and we'll get back to business. We'd make up for lost time at the end of the year. And of course, we all saw that was not to be the case. This has become a much more prolific pandemic, to use some alliteration. And once we saw the light at the end of the tunnel, was not the light of hope and beacon, but an oncoming truck loaded with even more coronavirus. We had to figure something out, and quickly. We had to figure out how to continue to operate and, if at all possible, generate some revenue. So at NRG Park, and I know that a lot of facilities around the country have done this same thing, but have created these, quote, task force. I think that's the new key word in a lot of these for facilities around the country, is the task force. You got a task force for everything. But we created the NRG Park Back to Work Task Force, and we had everybody on campus and a part of it. That was my group, the Sports Corporation, ASM Global, the Rodeo, the Texans, Aramark, who's our contracted concessionaire, and CSC, Contemporary Services Corporation. That's our event staffing coordinator. And part of this was also the close coordination with the city and county health authorities, because we obviously needed to keep them looped in. They were giving us information, and we were telling them what we were thinking of doing. And the goals here were really to collaborate and share information from each of our entities, both locally and certainly nationally. You know, the NFL and the Rodeo, Aramark, some of these national groups had the connections nationally that we were able to task. We also wanted to create a comprehensive back to work protocol that could be applied when the local lockdowns were lifted. And that was a way to get us all back into the office and hopefully stop working from home at some point. You know, we're certainly an industry that virtual working doesn't really work very well. So that was a new concept to a lot of us, was the work from home, but we were all clamoring to get back in our offices. And the last was to create a comprehensive back to business strategy. How do we get people back to NRG Stadium, NRG Center? How do we get them back, and when is it safe to do so? So, like, you know, I'm sure everybody listening in today, this is something nobody had ever done before. No one really had anywhere, at least nobody that was alive. Each of us have experience and expertise in our fields, but we had no idea how long this would last, what local, state, federal governments were going to require of us, and certainly what was the public going to expect when they walk through our doors again. That was the key thing, is what does the public want to see when they come back into a football game or a concert or a rodeo? And as part of our task force planning, we decided to enlist CAA Icon, which is a firm, a strategic consulting firm who'd recently created their venue recovery services to assist facilities like ours in planning for an eventual reopening. And several other consultants across the country did the same, and each provided roughly the same service. And their scope, for us at least, was a two-phased approach. First was the due diligence, you know, finding out what exactly the venue was about, what sort of concerns we might have, and what still needed to be done that we hadn't already. And, you know, the biggest part of phase one for us was the fan and staff survey, which we'll get to here in just a second. I have some interesting insights on that, but they were customized for us and also for each of our entities, for ASM, for the Rodeo, for the Texans, Aramark, everybody. So we really got some fascinating insight on the different niche groups, but also on a whole, what does the public want? And then phase two was the top to bottom nuts and bolts venue assessment, parking, entry, circulation, and back out to the car again. Essentially the whole fan experience and what would be needed to accommodate that. The hand sanitizing stations, the signage, the filtration, air filtration, you name it. They brought it all together, then paired that with a list of qualified vendors who could source those products within whatever budget we might have. So what was most interesting and likely to all of you was the results of the fan and staff surveys. The survey was sent out to more than 50,000 people in July and August of this year through ASM Global's, the Rodeos, and the Texans distribution lists. And we had almost 10,000 respondents, which was a great percentage of respondents. If for those that know about surveys, you generally don't get responses that high. So we were excited. I think people were just clamoring to say their piece and tell us what they were expecting. So we were glad to hear from them. You know, a little disclaimer is that the attitudes, of course, vary across the country. And as they say, timing is everything. We did this before the, quote, second wave appeared, and things seemed to be sort of waning at the time. So I imagine if you asked a lot of these questions today, you might have some different results based on people's perceptions of how things are going. So, you know, the real question.
Real quick, was that before the Pfizer and Moderna announcements that they're like 95% effective too? So I think there might be a
Absolutely.
balancing thing. Okay.
Sure.
It's before
Which,
that.
yeah, absolutely. Once those announcements came out, you probably have an even different reaction to a lot of these questions.
Yeah.
But you know, to answer the question I was asked to attempt to answer is, what is it going to take for fans to feel safe to return to sports and entertainment venues? As you can see on the screen there, at the time, 22% of the respondents said they would attend events as soon as public assembly facilities were open again. That was great to hear. So you still had this segment of the society that COVID be damned, we're coming back to the game. Almost half of those, 47%, said they would attend events immediately if additional safety precautions were put into place, a lot of the protocols that we've been working on. While 17% said they'd plan to wait for a vaccine. And what was interesting was that 15% said that they would attend with only a treatment, not just a vaccine, not a vaccine, but just a treatment, something, I guess one of the remdesivirs or something like that. So what does the public expect when they come back to make them feel safe? What protocols or equipment do they want to see? As you can see from the screen here, touchless equipment really led the pack, which was really no surprise to us. It's something that the industry has been trending towards for some time. This sort of accelerated that timeline. But the touchless hand sanitizing stations, the touchless faucets, toilet fixtures were considered the most important. Seat sanitization between events also ranked pretty high, which, again, we sort of expected. And interestingly enough, the availability of a COVID vaccine and testing ranked closer to the bottom, but an effective treatment ranked higher. Now, again, timing is everything. So I think we'd see a much different perception if we were to ask that same question today. So it's been a fascinating ride, but an interesting thing, especially, political conversations aside, the page here shows that most of the respondents to the survey would still attend an event if they were required to wear a face mask at all times, which NRG Park does. If the second you get onto the property, you've got to have a face covering on, and we will very kindly remind you to please wear your face mask or to adjust your face mask if you've got a chin diaper on that sits below your nose. So we've been doing that from the beginning. Most of the fan complaints have been very, very low, if any at all, and most folks have been really good about wearing them the whole time. A common theme we saw throughout, like I said, was the touchless. And that's the parking, the ticketing, the food and beverage, even merchandise. The highest ranked was always the touchless. So we're really trying to pick up more of that in a lot of our facilities and see if we can accelerate that timeline. And interestingly enough was the entry, and I'll talk about the exit in a second, but the entry precautions and several of the sections, the gloves and masks for employees was more important than mask and gloves for the attendees. So I think here it was a perception issue, is they wanted to come in and felt the perception of cleanliness and safe. So we went through a lot of that, and same thing for the food and beverage. Again, most respondents wanted to see gloves and masks for employees. Individual condiment packages also rank really high. This translated to the suites differently, where, and if for those of us fortunate enough to have been in a suite in a major stadium like this, you typically see a buffet style food service. You go in, you make your own plate, you grab your beer, you have a seat. Well, for most part, buffets are likely a thing of the past. It's either pre-prepared or an attendant with gloves and a mask and a face shield, in some cases, fixes your plate for you. You tell them what you want, and they serve it to you. Anything where you have the chance of cross-contamination, we've tried to eliminate, and that's an industry-wide thing. And that goes for the concession stands, to the suites, to what we call the hawkers, the guys selling the peanuts and stuff in the seating bowl. Another aspect that has become commonplace in retail and the service industry are the plexiglass barriers that you've seen between the guest and employee. We've seen them at the grocery store, the convenience store, and some debate its efficacy. But again, it speaks to two different types of safety measures that we've encountered. First is the outward facing, the aesthetic, those measures that make the guest feel safe, the masks and gloves for employees. the saturation of hand sanitizing stations that you see everywhere. You can't go 5 feet without being able to get a squirt of the hand sanitizer. The signage with the clean look and simple messaging that reminds you to wear your face mask or social distance. The stickers on the floor that you spoke to, Todd. Or the dedicated staff whose sole job it is, with an absolutely unique uniform, to go around and wipe down the high touch points in a facility. That's the doorknobs, escalator rails, handrails, countertops, the restrooms, you name it. And it really gives folks that perception of, man, this is a clean facility. I feel safer. I feel cleaner. I feel less likely exposed to coronavirus. And then there's the back of the house measures, which are those measures that are working to keep the public safe, but you may not see them. That's the air filtration, whether it's the UV or the actual filter itself, the CO2 monitoring in smaller spaces. When it first came out, a lot of the medical advice was to monitor the CO2. If you had a certain amount of CO2 in a room, that meant you had too many people, and it was the air filtration become ineffective. Also the seat sanitization between events, that, you know, most people aren't going to hang around after an event and watch people wipe down a seat. So the stuff that you don't necessarily see. One of the big ones was social distancing in the seating bowl, which we've all heard about in various forms. 64% of those surveyed would more likely attend an event with social distancing in the seating bowl. And what we found that, as regardless of capacity regulations, whether it's 50%, 75%, or some even still 25%, with the strict social distancing as defined by the CDC as the 6 foot between each person, you can only get about 17 to 20% of your capacity. So for a 72,000 seat stadium like NRG Stadium, your max capacity is about 14,000 people. And that's, I mean, at some point you have to ask yourself, is it economically viable to hold an event when you can only get 20% of your max capacity? And in fact, to date, the most we've had at a Texans game is about 9,000 people. And the max capacity, again, is about 14,300 there. So most stadiums have gone to a pod type seating, where seats are sold in 2, 4, 6, or 8 seats, a group of seats. So if you say, Todd, if you buy a ticket of 4, you have to register those names. You can't transfer those tickets to anybody else, so that we know that those people are within your household. They're known to you, and it's not, you know, you're not selling it to the scalper on the side of the street. But in your pod, you'll be a minimum of 6 feet away from the group around you. And the seats between you are banded, just like, you know, with pallet banding or whatever the method used, so that you can't go sit in those seats and encroach on somebody else's, quote, social distance pod. And as you can see from this slide, the interesting thing to us was the safety precautions related to exiting facilities. You know, it was about half and half according to our survey. And this was interesting to tackle from an operational perspective. So when you come into a stadium or a facility, it's easy to do the timed entry or specific gates, or somehow mitigate how people enter and keep them socially distanced. But when an event is over, say a football game or a concert, it's typically we all get up and leave all at the same time. Here we go, a mass exodus. And it's much different from the controlled entry. So how do you slow the flow of people to the exit doors? A popular one is the church dismissal, where you have an usher who goes row by row and says, okay, you may leave. You know, you followed the priest out the door. There are some schools of thought that use barriers or creating a particular flow pattern that creates the social distance needed. But and one thing we've noticed, though, is most people are generally aware of the people around them, and they self-social distance. You know, they say, well, you're too close, so I'm going to back up, or whatever the case might be, or they modify their exit path. But we can't always count on that. So taking all of this into consideration, all of the survey results, all of the people we've talked to, all of the best practices we've consulted over the last several months, we've found some common themes that we've instituted into our reopening plan. PPE, face coverings for staff and guests. Everybody, I mean, it's become commonplace now. Everybody does it. It's not uncommon. Touchless everything. The less someone has to touch something, the better they're going to feel about being in a facility. constant cleaning, the appearance of a facility being clean or regularly sanitized, keeps viral transmission lower, but it's also a psychological component of the fan experience. Social distancing, welcome. People like it. Keep on coming, but not too close. And mobile ordering and dedicated food pickup for food and beverage and even merchandise is popular as well, although no fundamental changes to how the food is prepared. So, and we have a good idea of what fans and staff expect of sports and entertainment facilities to institute to feel confident enough to return. And, you know, Todd, like we were talking a minute ago, now with the announcement of the vaccine, hopefully that timeline is accelerated. We expect the timing is, you know, May or June of 2021, when maybe not 100%, but we're certainly getting to a point where the 75%, 80% capacities might be able to be realized.
Okay, that is the gold nugget I was waiting for 25 minutes. When I go back in my mind to that slide, and it was great because I'm part of the 22% that's like, I'm going to the stadium. I don't care. I mean, I'm going to get sick and die at some point in my life. Hopefully it's when I'm 90 and not 50, but whatever. But knowing that there's all those other segments and everybody has their own view and their own thoughts, like religion. Everybody's got all the things they believe in and don't believe in. How does that group that doesn't agree with me come to where I'm at, and how long does it take? So you think if you had a crystal ball, you'd say 80% occupancy in May? And I'm not going to hold you to this, but.
Sure. You know, it's really hard. If anybody tells you they know, they're full of it, frankly. But based on the timing of the reports of the vaccines that we're hearing, the plans for distribution, and again, it's the federal government, you know, as Ronald Reagan's here, I'm here for the government, I'm here to help. Things could go awry. But at this point, we think May or June is a good starting point. We think anything before that is dicey. Obviously, we're seeing a second and third wave in some areas right now. And who knows how long that'll last with the holidays coming up. Who knows how long it'll take the Modernas and Pfizers of the world to get the vaccine distributed. And then also you have to rely on the logistical networks in each city. So, and then again, to your point a minute ago, is there is that segment of the society that doesn't want to take the vaccine. So all of those factors combined, but in our best estimation, from what we can see from our research, our industries, and the conversations we've had, I would think May or June, you're going to start seeing that increase in capacities.
So this puts you, I think, in a precarious position as things evolve, for you and for us as an event business. Would you let Todd Phillips in your stadium, who doesn't care about social distancing? It's already been through my family. I didn't catch it, but everybody in my family was exposed to it, and some had tested positive. Nobody was. So I just have this feeling of cavalier. Let's just roll. So are you going to let me in your stadium, you know, with a cram full of people, or are you going to try to control this all the way through? And so when do you start to release those restrictions? Do you just kind of monitor it as things come along? And then I know we only have 2 minutes left. I got to ask you about rodeo. What are you going to do with that?
Well, for your first question, you know, there's no way to know. We are going to monitor how things go, how the vaccine's distributed, how people are reacting to that. But first and foremost is we are going to follow all of our local health authority guidelines. We're subject to their control. Obviously, the city of Houston, the county, are the ones who shut down rodeo earlier this year. We certainly don't want a repeat of that. So we're following all of their local guidelines, and of course the CDC and federal government. We're going to keep those measures in place as long as both the regulatory agencies and also the public feel that it's necessary. For the rodeo, man, I tell you what, my guess is that we'll see a shift in timing for next year's rodeo. I think everybody agrees March is a little soon, but nothing firm has been announced yet. So I'm hopeful that we've been working with the rodeo for some time now, you know, a couple of months on this, but my anticipation is that you'll see a pushback to a later time in the year, and then have some type of rodeo. It may not be the full rodeo we're all used to, but it'll definitely be something.
So I like that you tied it back to the government agencies, because I think that makes sense to sort of use that as your gauge, because I bet you could fill half your stadium today with the cavalier people who are just ready to go with and cut those bands on the seats and let them sit wherever. They'll do it.
Without
And
a
I
doubt.
think they go to a rock concert, right? So it's going to be interesting to watch it all unfold. I wish you the best. I'm going to watch this closely, because I think I go back to my college days. I learned that Alan Greenspan was a genius, whether that's true or not. But one of the things I learned in early economics was that he would sit and read how full the rail cars were, not going from the Midwest out east, but coming back from east to the Midwest.
Sure.
If there were lots of goods traveling back, the economy was going to have an uptick. I'm watching sports stadiums. A full stadium means we're back in business. And I think we had a strong economy coming in, and we could be strong coming out. But I think that's going to be an important thing that all of America should and will be watching. And you're in the middle of it, trying to figure it out.
It's been fun. You know, my last comment would be that, is this a cultural shift? You know, after 9/11, there was a huge cultural shift that has long-term impacts that we're still seeing today. Is the question, I think, that's unknown and interesting to see how it gets answered is this generation's 9/11? Is this a cultural shift, especially for our industry? I think time will only tell that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that, my personal opinion, the cleanliness stuff is awesome. And it might cost more from an operating perspective, but I think flu seasons will be lighter, and everything we do going forward is better if we keep our distance and we're clean and we keep things clean. But I don't know. Let's get back at it, right, Ryan?
Amen to that. Amen.
Okay, everybody else that's on right now, we have a huge panel coming up. And as you were coming in, I muted you and shut off your cameras. And so I'm hoping you can unmute yourselves. I'm going to hit a button that I believe says ask all to unmute. Turn your cameras on. Hopefully I didn't block you from turning your camera on. I've made that mistake before. Again, thanks, Ryan. I'm going to real quick just share my screen, go back and show you all the lobby one more time while everybody logs in. Look at this. This is the panel right here. These are a great group of folks. We had a prep call, and I'm so excited to talk with all of them. So if you want to know who they are and what they do, I'll have them introduce themselves, obviously, but it's hard to remember a group of 9 people, what their names are. So go back to this lobby. That's how you got here. And click to LinkedIn with them, because people appreciate that. All right, I've got 4.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I got you.
It won't let me start my video. It says you're still blocking.
Same here, Todd. This is Charles.
Am going through and clicking buttons, but I believe we'll make that happen.
Hey, look at that.
There we go. We have a full, for the first time in my web hosting career, I don't know if y'all can see the same view I do, but we have a full Hollywood Squares.
Okay. That's good.
I don't know.
Some of us have actually done work in Hollywood, so it's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, I was just thinking and then somebody came in and tipped the balance.
Oh,
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining this group. I have to start off with, this is going to be a fun panel, fantastic group of people, tons of information. So I want to remind my panelists, A, to be succinct, but B, you're not interesting when you're succinct. So don't necessarily cut yourself off when you have something interesting to say. So I'm going to try to approach this like a boardroom discussion. So if we can all imagine ourselves in a virtual boardroom, and we're going to talk about recovery, road to recovery. We're going to talk about the entertainment industry, hospitality industry, a little bit about where things are at today, but how this unfolds, because 2021, year of the vaccine, let's go. How do we recover? How do we get where we're going to go? What steps are we going to be able to take? What are we taking now? All of those just topics we want to discuss and get your insight on, because you're the important one. This also means with a large group like this, it's very easy to sit and be quiet. So please don't do that. If somebody makes a point and you think of a great counterpoint or something to add on to that, please do. If you're in the chat room, please ask questions. All of these panelists can sit and type in the chat room while someone else is talking. So if you ask a question, they can respond to you. So please make sure, though, that you click that button that says all attendees and panelists so that we can do that. All right. I have a couple of things to do. Housekeeping. Number one, we've allotted extra time. So I hope all of you, if you're available, stay an extra 10, 15 minutes. I will stay on and continue to we can all talk. I'm recording this and putting it on our YouTube channel. I should bring up our YouTube channel real quick. Hang on, now I lost all of you. I'll show that in a second. On our YouTube channel, you'll be able to watch this. So if you have to log off, you have something else going on, come back and watch it on YouTube. All right, I got to do a little Globe Life Field B-roll for HKS. I'm going to show a quick screen share video on that, and then we'll get started. Oh boy, I don't see it. So hold tight. Let's do this. Let's go around and do a really succinct introduction for everybody while I tee up that video. Thank you. So let's just start with Lily, and I'll try to call off your names and go around the room that way. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lily Weiss, and I'm the Executive Director of the Dallas Arts District in Dallas, Texas. And I'm excited to be on this panel and to learn from my fellow panelists and to get questions from each of you. We are the largest contiguous arts district, urban arts district in the United States. And there's plenty to talk about with the arts, and certainly pre-pandemic and during the pandemic and post-pandemic. Thanks, Todd.
All right, let's move on to Maggie. I'm going around my screen. I don't think you can see everybody in the same order, but
Right.
I don't know
Maggie,
what box I'm in, but excited to be here. Thanks. Todd, I appreciate the Riverwalk picture at the opening. So that's wonderful. And Eric, the mention of San Antonio is maybe a city to come back. And Ryan, I really appreciate your survey. That's been great. But first and foremost, I'm the executive director of the Riverwalk Association. And our job is to promote the Riverwalk with events and memberships and taking care of our businesses. And the Riverwalk's considered the #1 tourist attraction in the state. We get about 14 million visitors. That does not include conventions. It has an economic impact of about $3.5 billion to the city annually. So with that, that's my succinct introduction.
all right, thanks. Reminder to everybody to mute your microphone when you're not talking. That'll cut down on the echo and reverb kind of thing for other people. Bob Bullis, are you there? Give us a quick intro.
I am here. Thank you for that. Bob Bullis with HKS Architects, architect with the hospitality studio at HKS. I've spent the last 3 years out at Globe Life Park, the architect on Live by Lowe's Hotel, and the upcoming, soon to be started construction on the Lowe's Arlington Hotel and Convention Center.
Fantastic. Molly Alexander, please.
Oh, sorry about that. So I'm Molly Alexander. I'm the executive director of the Downtown Austin Alliance Foundation. So we work in parks, public spaces, and retail developments in downtown Austin. In addition to my work there, I own 2 retail stores. So I'm a retailer as well. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Todd.
For sure, likewise. And now everybody got out of order, so I gotta use my memory. Fred Ortiz, so off to you.
Good morning. My name is Fred Ortiz. I'm a design principal with HKS. I specialize in sports and entertainment, everything from high school all the way up to professional. A lot of my career has been spent in the collegiate realm, but as of late, I, like Bob Bullis, also worked around the Globe Life Field Entertainment District. So very excited to be a part of this panel today.
So I do have notes. I have a video of that field, and I think there's another file that when you all are ready, just say, hey, Todd, can you put that up now? So I'll wait for your direction on
Okay,
that.
thank you.
Jonathan Horowitz, can you hear me? You're up.
Yes,
man.
Ken, now you were muted there for a sec. Yeah, good morning, Jonathan Horowitz. I'm in Houston. I am a recovering attorney and current real estate salesperson. Work with Colliers International here in Houston. I also, earlier this year, launched my own hospitality consulting company. Great timing. after about 15 years as an owner operator in the restaurant and bar business. I've also been the president of the Houston Restaurant Association and currently sit on the executive committee of the Texas Restaurant Association out of Austin. So I work with a lot of different restaurant concepts and developers in the Texas market and kind of have a bit of a feet on the ground experience of what's been going on for the past 9-10 months now.
I was going to say finger on the pulse because I think, Jonathan, we've talked a couple times. You seem to have a good idea what's going on and where we're headed. My new favorite person, Charles.
Hi, I'm Charles Valenrod, Executive Director of the Texas Craft Brewers Guild. We represent craft breweries across the state. We have about 350 brewery members. That includes operating breweries and breweries in planning. People actually, even in the current situation, still planning to open a brewery in the near future.
And if you're wondering why I said he's my favorite person, I got to show you this. Check out his profile picture is him holding a beer. God bless you. You're the only person I know that has that, and I'm thinking of changing mine. Monty, are you there?
I am. I think you were muted. So I'm sickly this morning, but I don't have COVID, thank goodness. So
yay.
Anyway, I'm Monty Anderson. I'm the president of Options Real Estate, an incremental development company that works in Southern Dallas County only. I'm also a co-founder and senior faculty for the Incremental Development Alliance. We teach people how to be developers all over the country. I'm also the previous owner of the Belmont Hotel. I restored it and ran it for 10 years, and thank goodness I sold it before COVID happened. Also restored the Texas Theater, and I have many different small restaurants that I've helped put together in Southern Dallas County, everything from 200 square feet and up, which turns out to be really good these days to have those small takeout restaurants. So thank you for letting me be here.
Thank you for joining us. It's sick or not, it's tough. Well, that's one of the benefits of COVID, though. Working from home or wherever you're at, you can kind of roll out of bed and sort of just get your camera turned on and go for it. And you only have to dress from here up. All right, so this is going to be a challenge for me. Like I said, feel like I'm herding cats with this big group. So I need you all to be active. So I'm going to throw out some questions, and I kind of just want to hear from everybody that has something to say, and let's just get this thing rolling. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about COVID and the misery we've had for 9 months, because we all lived it. We know it. We know what's happened. But a little bit of state of the market in terms of what's gotten a little bit better and how do we go from here to there. So I see Molly nodding her head like, I got something to say. So why don't you go first? But don't expect me to call on everybody every time. Just jump in, please.
I was nodding just because I agreed with you about COVID. But in downtown Austin, I can tell you a couple of things that we've seen a little bit of an uptick. And of course, I think other markets has as well, is the leisure travel market. Clearly, people want to get out of where they are. It's Texas travelers tend to be #1 destination travelers anyway within the state of Texas. And we do see those numbers rising. A much better level than where we were in March and April. So we're seeing that as an uptick and a small little uptick in certain segments of the retail market where particularly in downtown when you don't have any markets there. So our employees aren't coming back. We don't have as many tourists and we have a smaller residential base. We're all struggling, but we do see a little bit of glimmer this holiday season that we didn't anticipate. And so I think it's predominantly from the leisure travelers.
Molly, are you seeing anything with regard to convention business and bookings?
We probably will not see an uptick there until about 2023, 2024. So not yet. But I don't work for Visit Austin, but Visit Austin, I think, would tell you that probably 2022 is where they're seeing some bookings, not 2021. On the large scale market.
Right. We've gotten some information nationally regarding restaurant traffic as well. And, some of it is good in that we've seen kind of a leveling off, and there's been, some adaptation, obviously, but from a grand scale, some of the numbers talking about getting restaurants back to pre-pandemic levels in terms of traffic and revenue. Two very interesting statistics. One is fast casual, fast food may get back to pre-pandemic levels by the end of 2022, and full service restaurants may not get to that level until 2026, which is a bit disconcerting, as you would imagine. And that's getting back to pre-pandemic levels. But I think, we're seeing the impact, forward-looking impact of people changing their habits. It's going to impact everything. And that's kind of why I asked about the convention business, because that's very closely tied, not only to the travel market, but to the restaurant market as well.
So I have something I want to add here. This, before COVID came in my company in Southern Dallas, we could never put big restaurants in or big hotels and things like that. So out of desperation, we were always building like 400 square foot coffee shops, a 900 square foot bar and grill. And, we've got down in DeSoto, we've got 7 400 square foot restaurants in an incubator. All of my properties are all 100% and hitting all-time highs right now, because we were prepared for something that was going to happen anyway. These big bulky restaurants, big bulky developments, they were not sustainable anyway. And COVID exposed us early on. And I really couldn't believe it. I mean, we're having record months of occupancy in our properties. And we had the 2 months, of March and April, but the new world is different. Whether COVID was here or not, it was going to get here. And if you drive out, like out interstates into Louisiana, places like that, you're going to see tons of closed restaurants and strip centers and hotels everywhere. And so unless you've got a unique vibe, a boutiqueness, and in fact, I'm planning a new hotel right now in one of my developments, but it's only 20 rooms. And so I think small is going to be the new thing, and tight. It's kind of like a family. You can kind of, you can tighten up in a bad time.
Yeah.
I feel a counterpoint coming from Fred and Bob. So if you want me to throw up pictures of your project,
Well,
I'll get that going while you talk.
maybe not just yet. I want to comment on that about the new world, or the new wow factor, for example. I think that it all, for us, it comes down to an experience, right? We're trying to shape memories for our visitors to any of these venues. And I think that maybe a new stadium in the future is probably not going to be the 75, 80,000 seater. It's going to be something much smaller, more compact, more intimate, but maybe influenced by COVID and how a seating bowl is created. As a father to 2 sons who play college football, I've been going to college football games on Saturdays, and it's really interesting to see these large venues. I'm talking Ole Miss, Texas, A&M, TCU, the Swamp. I mean, all these places are huge, right? But they're at 25% capacity, and it's completely changing the experience. The food and beverage experience is different. So you ask yourself, I mean, can you imagine what these universities are dealing with, where the funding is all of a sudden, the revenue is much, much less. They're in the red now. They're letting people go. They can't staff a complete athletics department. So now they're looking to see, well, maybe the project that we were going to build is not going to happen. So maybe we need to rethink and reimagine what we currently have in order to go forward. And to Monty's point, maybe, again, the small aspect, whatever that might be relatively in scale, is probably part of this future that we're walking into.
Yeah, Fred, and I'd be curious to know how technology is going to be impacted by that in as you're designing things, because one thing we're seeing is a major shift to reliance on new technology, whether it's third-party ordering or online ordering, business-wise. shrinking the footprint and relying more on technology. And I can imagine that's going to happen in other fields as well.
That's a huge key, Jonathan, because we believe that like the 95% of the fan base is not in the seating bowl, right? So we got to find a way to enhance that connection. So how do we monetize that? How do we assist these owners, these venue operators, to make that connection, to sell that seat in a very unique way, and allowing technology to lead the way?
I think to the small point, oh, I'm sorry. To the small point, Monty, as a retailer, so I own 2 retail stores. One's a wine bar, home goods store combination, and the other is a gift store candy bar. And I think what we're going to see in the retail market is really very localized, people being very intentional, and really wanting to know who their retailer is. Now, I think there's a difference between Amazon and kind of big needs and basic needs, and then kind of localized needs. And I think some themes we're beginning to see is gratitude, that as we come out, that we're very grateful for what we had before COVID. We're very grateful we got through COVID, and really the expression of gratefulness. So I do think it's going to be like reserving the entire boutique hotel for the family or for close friends, because we now know what we believe in and we know what is important to us, and then shopping or maybe eating dinner at that local restaurant. So I do think we're going to see a trend in retail and food and beverage and travel around gratefulness, probably coming in 2021 and 2022 particularly.
Yeah, from a craft brewery standpoint, I just want to touch on the technology. You know, the craft brewery is not an efficient business, not usually a technologically advanced business, but we saw breweries quickly adjust to online ordering, to go curbside pickup, and reservation systems for when they do bring people in. And that's what's going to drive the future for coming back to the tap room, is being able to manage the crowd and manage the orders and make it feel like an intimate experience, but still staying safe and healthy.
I've been waiting since I was 16 to get a beer to go, Charles.
Hey,
I
Charles.
want to segue on that too a little bit. We're the Riverwalk. We don't have a lot of where you can just pull up and grab and go, but alcohol sales have saved so many of the restaurants. And I really appreciate working with Emily Knight with TRA, since you're a part of TRA. It's been wonderful. We have one operator whose sales had a record October. He is not the normal, but he attributed it to alcohol sales in his establishment. That's been big. And I want to speak to conventions. Our Visit San Antonio doesn't think conventions will come back either, Molly, as quickly as we wish. We wish we had that. The safety efforts, though, with the touchless, that has been humongous in our marketing efforts. And we feel like that's paid off, getting people to come down. We see so many more weekend visits, and they're impromptu. It's the drive market from Houston, Dallas, South Texas. And sometimes the hotels can't figure out how to staff. They've kind of figured that out a little bit, but that's leisure, definitely. But it's a little bit erratic. And with this weekend, or with this new spike, it kind of goes up and down a little bit. So we've changed models, we've enhanced safety, but we've seen results from all that, and we've seen results from alcohol sales. So don't know whether that's good for the future or not, but it makes an impact.
It is, Maggie, and I appreciate you calling out Emily, because she's done a phenomenal job. She's the new CEO of the Texas Restaurant Association, and she really stepped into it. I mean, she started, in kind of mid-18, and all of a sudden got faced with this massive challenge. But just for everybody's edification, the Texas legislature comes back in session in about a month and a half. And one of the biggest things that we're lobbying for right now is to make those changes permanent, so that we can allow restaurants to sell alcohol to go permanently. It's been very successful. The TABC is very receptive to that. Restaurants have been very responsible about it, and it has literally been a savior for many in the industry. So we'll see how that goes. I will tell you that also does play into, again, going back to kind of real estate and design and these other things, where if those things do become permanent, you're going to see that impact how things are designed and built, and the size of things. And nowadays when we're designing restaurants, we're thinking about how are people going to get in and out? Where does a third-party delivery folks come in? And how do we get, more optimized for smaller footprints? So it's a big effort right now, and it's literally changing the entire industry.
I will just add one more thing, and ditto for what everyone else has said. In the arts, certainly we were the first to close and pretty much the last to get permission to open. But I will say the Arts District, most of the Arts District is open in terms of the cultural venues. Our outdoor venues are very successful, and most of them are presenting live and local to support our local artist economy. I will also say that the safety, really convincing audiences and patrons that we have gone overboard on the safety, and I don't think anyone can go even overboard on it, to have them trust us. But I will give an example, because the presenter of dance, international dance, this year went for an all US season, obviously for travel. The first company was presented at the end of last month, and it was from New York. This company obviously could not rehearse in New York City. So what they did is took an example from sports, and they took the company to a state, an accompanying state, an adjacent state, and they rented a space that they lived in, that they rehearsed in, that they sanitized, that they all cooked. And it was the full company. They tested regularly. Before they came on the plane to Dallas, they tested again. And the hotel that they stayed in were able to accommodate this bubble by giving them an entire floor for the company. So this kind of situation, they were backstage. They actually ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner backstage in their little bubble with the stage crew who had also been tested. And the other addition to this, when you talk about technology, there's a space adjacent to the Winspear Opera House that is a smaller space. And the presenter did tables because several of the patrons weren't comfortable in going into a large theater, even though they were social distanced, even though it was a small capacity. They did not feel comfortable in a large chamber. So this particular presenter bought a higher resolution camera and sold tickets for these tables to be socially distant in this space, that they can still get out and watch this huge screen of the exact same show that was being shown adjacent in the large theater. Certainly the arts will keep in person, and certainly keep virtual programming now too. We've seen how successful that is, but it is an added cost.
Yeah, that's interesting, Lily. How did it work to have people watching remotely on a big screen? Was it successful?
Very successful. In fact, that area, there's enough room to be socially distanced with 20 tables, and it was sold out. So it's interesting because many of them are subscribers and regular patrons, and this presenter wanted to do what he could to make people comfortable. So it was sold out for that night. And it was quite emotional to see that people, and I will say this, at any of the events, in-person events that I have attended, everyone is so happy to be out and actually participating in their community. So that is the one thing, when you talk about grateful, we are grateful finally to be in a place that we can laugh and be together and to enjoy entertainment together.
Just a quick reminder, Jonathan's been putting stuff in the chat room, and then Molly responded. So there's stuff out there for you. But Molly, you got to click that button to send it to everybody, not just panelists. I'm sorry that Zoom defaults to just panelists. So cool. This is great though. Bob, I haven't heard from you yet.
I feel compelled to give you an in the trenches report out on hospitality at HKS. We have a studio of 85 people or so. majority of projects, large and small, hospitality and entertainment venues. And honestly, it's been a real hit. We've lost projects where it's been one of the biggest challenges for overall HKS firm. We do hospitality out of about 4 different offices all throughout the United States. Two observations I'd make, and then one I'd like to comment on something Lily said, is what we're finding is large projects. A big hotel convention center project takes 1.5 years to design, 3 years to build. So that's 5 years out. And as long as financing's available and there's courage on the part of the developer, owner, or municipality to invest in the future, we're seeing some of those are continue to proceed or go forward. The Arlington Hotel and Convention Center is a great example of that. The other type of project we're seeing is more the smaller scale boutique hotels, less investment, quicker to the market. And you would think, though, that during this time period with COVID, there might be some fall off in sales and less pricing, better pricing on the construction side. We can maybe talk about that in the future, but we haven't really seen that. We actually have seen the costs of construction stay fairly steady. What we're not seeing is escalation, future escalation. We're starting to see that kind of plateau out and start to go down. So that does help to offset some of the cost. And then finally, the comment that I want to make about Lily's comment is we're seeing that the path forward, at least for the first couple of years coming out of COVID, is community-based. And you do have the Texas Triangle where we're seeing, leisure travel within the state, the East Coast, the West Coast. And what we're seeing is the hoteliers are focused on trying to provide local arts and venues and make those connections so that somebody who's in Austin or Dallas that wants to go to Austin and be a part of the arts scene has a better connection, more of almost of a bed and breakfast kind of feel, where there's a connection between the operators of the hotel that really provide good input on what there is to do. Amenitizing outside the footprint of the hotel might be another way to think of that.
Just adding a quick comment on what Bob was mentioning. We have a hotel that is getting ready to break ground, and we spoke to the designers, and they are willing to actually look at, they're very interested in, obviously, since it's right in the arts district, they're very interested in promoting the arts and having a venue that is appropriate for perhaps pop-up arts artists and presentations that can happen in a hotel. So we set up a small committee with certainly members of the Arts District and Downtown Dallas Inc., so that we can actually talk about multi-purpose spaces that would be good, whether they're indoors, whether it's a larger pool deck that would be a great space for a site-specific art performance. So that is something that, as Bob mentioned, that we are, thank goodness that we are collaborating, because together is the one, it's fun to collaborate, and two, we're going to all come out of it together.
Yeah, Lily, I think we're fortunate in living kind of in this part of the country where we've got many more months of the year where we can be outside, and we're seeing that, locally here. We're just in the chat talking about, outdoor drive-in movies, and things like that have become very, very popular very quickly again. And we're seeing a big emphasis on outdoor dining spaces, patio availability, and that's all, becoming extremely coveted right now, that and obviously drive-throughs. But to Bob's point about larger developments and the time frame, that it takes to get something off the ground, I recently started working with a development company here in Houston that's got a big mixed use project that they had started pre-COVID, and they had just gotten into the leasing process, and of course everything got put on hold, but now they're kind of kickstarting again. And what we're seeing is you know, we know that it's going to be a couple of years before anybody moves in to that. But the trick right now is convincing concepts, whether they be local or larger, to make that commitment now, to you know, get into the leasing process where there's still a lot of unknown, and it's very difficult to convince people that, yeah, you know, sign up now and let's hope in 2 years everything's back to normal again, and your investment will pay off. That's where kind of the rubber meets the road, and it's still a little early right now to get people to really sign on the dotted line because there's just a lot of unknowns that are still out there.
I mean, I think in the retail world, if you have a lease right now, you're probably on the wrong side of the game. And if you're going to come in after the pandemic, this portion of it passes, you're probably on the right side of the game. And I think the interesting thing will be what happens with landlords, because, you know, the real estate market and ownership will move more slowly and calculated, because it's a lot easier to keep a tenant than it is to find a new one. However, what is going to be forgiveness and what is that going to look like? And is there going to be any cushion? And I think we'll know post December as we go into first quarter of next year. We anticipate in downtown Austin to lose at least a third of our retail operators, food and beverage and retail. We hope it's not greater than that. And every market's a little different. I mean, Monty and DeSoto, it's a smaller market. People are working from home. They're not driving into downtown Dallas or larger employment areas. And so those retail areas in neighborhoods and other places are doing fairly okay, 50%, 75% of sales. But in the central business core, it's very different. So it is going to be interesting how the real estate side of this and the ownership side of this and tenants play. CBRE had a great seminar and really talked about the fact that winners and losers, and unfortunately in a crisis that happens, but creatives and innovation will come out of a crisis. And so I think that's going to be the upside of retail, and the upside of food and beverage is the innovation of a new generation of entrepreneurs. It's just, we've got some great ones we hate to lose going forward, but all entrepreneurs are creative. So hopefully people can figure it out as well. But I mean, I think there's this downside and upside, and it just depends on where you sit.
Molly, I think that landlords, you got a good point. You know, the landlord, I know this, I'm a landlord to nearly, 400 and something tenants, and most of them are small businesses. And the landlords, I've always been involved with my tenants, because being in Southern Dallas County, we always had to be, we were always desperate, for business. So this is nothing new to us. This is just normal business for us, but we've had to be a lot more involved. In fact, we have a brewery in Oak Cliff called Oak Cliff Brewery, and they had a tap room and they were shut down in the beginning, and he was fairly new in business, and we had to keep him in business. So in 1 week, we created an outdoor beer garden and got around the loopholes of the law, and were able to, and it was a spot I was clearing off anyway. It was just, trees and landscape. But I think that, that in Texas, people don't realize this, but we have a really lot of good months, of outdoor weather. And, we should have already been outside. If you go to Pasadena, California, out there, most of their restaurants, they're just the restrooms and the kitchen inside, and everything else is outside. And in Texas, we could easily be that way, but we've got to build differently outside. We've got to prepare, for August, July and August with a little bit of, of environmental control and some things like that, some fly control. But I think what it's causing us to do is going to be good. It's going to be like going back 100 years, though. We're going backwards. So history repeats itself, and I think going back to small and being able to connect Main Street, your little Main Street stores, with global sales. So you have that boutiqueness of local, but that international sales through Amazon. I think it's a good time to be a small entrepreneur.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to what Molly said, and it really resonated with me, which is the innovation and forward thinking. And I think as a collective, we must challenge everything in order to drum up the unexpected, right? That which enhances the value proposition and alters our comfort levels to re-engage. I think, yeah, it's these owners are allowing 25% capacity, or vendors aren't, having to shut their doors for a while and then eventually reopen. But I feel like we must lead. And I think back to the idea of shocking our muscle memory and flexing those muscles that we haven't used in order to reprogram, knowing that this is only temporary, but in some interesting way, it's shaping a new future.
You know, as a retailer, I always say you have to pivot during COVID every 2 weeks. So, you know, we had to pivot to close. We had to pivot to figure out online. We had to pivot this, we had to pivot that. I don't think I've ever moved so quickly and so desperately at the same time with a team of people who were just amazing, even though they didn't work for us any longer. They wanted us to succeed. And so, and then bringing back on a new team and reformatting business plans. I mean, entrepreneurs are there to be creative and we're excited about it. It's just exhausting to have to do it every 2 weeks, but it's exhilarating at some levels, because if you can come out of it on the other side, you will reinvent yourself. And the community will be there with you. And that's what's exciting. I think, Monty, I mean, I'm a Main Street retailer. You know, I work in downtown Austin. I have 2 Main Street businesses in a smaller community outside. And it's kind of this resurgence of a small town or small town feel, and this gratitude of a community that says, we want you to stay here because you're part of our identity. First floor retail, food and beverage is a community's identity. That's how we connect with our communities. And that psychological connection to communities means we stay there, we raise our family, we, you know, help create jobs. You know, it's really, really important. And I think that, you know, if we don't do anything else out of this pandemic, but recognize the value of small mom and pops and how businesses shape our identity, I think we'll really shape our cities differently going forward. At least I hope so.
Molly, I just quickly, because I don't want to hog but I live right now where I'm at. I'm in a loft apartment in a project I built on Main Street in Duncanville in downtown. And I live above a cheap Chinese joint, a coffee shop, a bar, and an Italian restaurant. So I'm sick at home, but I have everything I need right below me.
The same idea goes for the arts. You know, it used to be that a symphony orchestra, you would expect everyone to come to them to see a performance. And I will say that Kim Noltemy and the Dallas Symphony Orchestra have thought of many unique ways to get out to the neighborhoods. And the most recent one is that they rented what's called a concert truck, and it is going all over Dallas. It has musicians booked. It opens up. It has lighting in it. The musicians are there, and people either gather socially distanced around this concert truck, or they actually, because the whole chat room is about drive-ins, they're taking over parking lots, and people can just drive in to enjoy the concert. So it's a small ensemble.
So Lily, how do they monetize that? Because I love these ideas. I love the virtual. We've tried that, but is it through sponsorships, ticket sales?
It is absolutely through sponsorships, because the board and board members and sponsors and obviously larger donors, they feel it's important that the arts stay relevant and present in the community now, that we can't shut the doors. We can't open the doors for an entire symphony. But at the same time, the symphony's paying their musicians at union, you know, they're being paid. And some of them, in order to be socially distanced on stage, it can't use the entire symphony right now. So the other musicians are working, they're alternating, working the neighborhoods, et cetera. So that's how it's basically through sponsors and donors is how that's coming in.
Yeah, and it gives, you know, to Molly's point about the small businesses, it gives the opportunity to keep people employed. We're finding the same thing, you know, with, unfortunately, the lack of stimulus money coming from the government. You know, hospitality industry has kind of been crushed in that regard. And, you know, hospitality across the country is the second largest private employer in the entire country by industry. And I mean, the ripple effects of that in travel and entertainment and everything else is extraordinary. And, you know, I don't know what's going to happen as we go forward with Congress through January and beyond. But we are really, really pushing hard for additional help, you know, as we go through these winter months. Because if, you know, as Molly was saying earlier, if we're going to lose a third of the small businesses in major metro areas, and this is not just Austin, this is across the country, it's going to be decades of impact on the labor force and everything else. And we really, really do need to get after everybody in Washington about, additional help for these small businesses, because we all know how many people and the percentage of people in the country that are employed by small businesses. It's massive. And, people, we got 2 months of support for now a 9-month issue. It's just not sustainable for the long run. Even with all the adaptation and the pivoting and, we talk about changing the industry. I mean, a lot of things were trending, over the past couple of years. This has been accelerated now by 5-10 years, and the adaptation's been phenomenal. But if I were to tell you right now, go open a new business and maybe you'll do 60% of what you thought you were going to do in terms of revenue, who's going to open a new business? Nobody's going to do it. There needs to be additional support in order to get people through probably the next year. That's my political statement for the day. Sorry. We need more support.
100% behind that. 100%.
Amen, right?
I
don't know about you guys. Congress spent 25% of their $1 trillion budget on small businesses. Come on. Where did the other $750 billion go? Where can maybe a little bit of that can free up?
I don't trust, the government for anything and don't depend on them. And I'm against tax abatement. And as a developer, I'm against grants and tax abatement and all of that. And the projects, I'm doing a new project I closed on in South Dallas, in a really hard part of South Dallas. I closed on it on April the 9th. If you imagine what we were at in April the 9th. And it's before it's finished, before the construction is finished, it's nearly 50% occupied, because I've created spaces in that building that are at least from $500 to $600 a month and up. And the locals in that neighborhood who have been disenfranchised are coming out like crazy and starting their businesses. It'd be like the hair salon in an independent place. I've got a small vegan restaurant that's 800 square feet, that's takeout. I've got a tax lady, I've got a tattoo guy. They're all independent people who've lost their income, and they're saying, hey, I've got to make it, create me a space. And by keeping it small, I can get a high price per square foot to make the numbers work as a developer without incentives, without any government help. Because government, to me, ought to be putting in sidewalks and the arts and parks and, the things like that. It shouldn't be subsidizing small businesses. I think that's just my opinion. And
I don't want to get into politics. We could get off the rails quick if we keep going down that road, but I think we've covered both sides. So let's move on. Fred, I see you unmuted, and Joni asked a question in the chat room here about how do we design going forward. I'm excited to see this. And Molly, frankly, I have to thank you, because on our prep call, you were the first person to open my eyes to how much entrepreneurial innovation we have to look forward to. So I'm calling this next decade our entrepreneurial decade. And I think it's going to be it's going to be because of a lot of pain. A lot of people will have lost their life savings in their restaurants and businesses, and the lowest income people that didn't have any savings are suffering. But on the backs of that hard work, we're going to build some cool stuff. But I want to hear from Fred and Bob, and on Joni's question, how do we adapt and design? And I know a lot of us are going to want to say these changes are permanent, but are they? I mean, how many people want to just get back to normal, and how do we balance that in some of this going forward?
Yes, Todd. So I like the term pivoting. Or responding to the various dynamics that are presented, or variables. And we just experienced that with Globe Life Field, in that we were scheduled to open on one day, and then all of a sudden COVID comes in. And but thankfully, Major League Baseball decides to play the World Series there, or the NLCS. And so all of a sudden, there was this energy in a venue that was dead, that wasn't being fully utilized. And then as part of the entertainment district that we have been shaping for over 25 years, back to Globe Life Park, AT&T, now Texas Live, Lowe's Hotel, and then Globe Life Field. I mean, it's amazing that the nucleus of all this was all of a sudden like recharged. And even though it was 25% capacity, even though people had to wear masks, even though the venue was so focused on the World Series and baseball, I mean, it was so beautiful to see that this notion of getting back to some sort of normalcy it was in effect. And it's almost like, I think as people, we maybe crave that high level of connectivity and being in the public realm, and almost like blurring the lines between what is a public plaza and for example, at Texas Live, there's a cluster of small businesses, and maybe Bob can speak in higher detail there. But to me, it's like they were working independently, but they're shaping something greater. And just like each of these components creates a much greater element in an entertainment district. So going forward, we've talked about scalability, we talked about downsizing, we talked about technology. I think all these things, and for me, again, the power of sports is huge, right? It lives with us. It's memory making. And I think as we look at defining or shaping new concepts for new venues, there is going to, again, that muscle memory. I'm going to challenge myself. I'm going to challenge our clients to be able to think about flexibility. I think that's the key. I think, Lily, you were kind of noting a few things there where, and maybe even the drive-in theaters, another concept too, that it's in our DNA to actually think about, hey, sometimes the backs of these buildings are blank surfaces and you've got a surface parking lot there. Well, why can't we wire that and project on that wall? And then all of a sudden you're extending your ticketed area or your revenue generating area. So Bob, can you expand on that? And Todd, this might be a good time to show that video as Bob's talking maybe.
Absolutely. So to that point, on the new Arlington Hotel and Convention Center, which is 1 million square feet, 888 rooms, 21 stories, about 3 years to build. On the back of that, we did do exactly what you just said, Fred, and that we have a video wall. It's a mesh screen video wall on the back of the garage overlooking the event lawn, which is going to allow them to be able to play the AT&T, the football games at AT&T and the Globe Life Field games, the baseball games. And so they can share with their joint partners, the Rangers, in the revenue streams that might come out of that. And so that was an innovative approach for Lowe's Hotel. I think we're looking at the video here, and Fred can jump in because he's the master designer on this, and he's dedicated at least 3 years of his life to this. But Fred, why don't you give a little narrative as we walk through it?
Yeah, it's interesting that when you lay out your 5-year plan to do let's say, for example, a hotel, well, the ballpark wasn't that different. And I think as Todd is looking at a decade, you might be able to pull off 1, maybe 2 projects of this scale. But I love the idea of scalability too, because Monty's talking about these smaller scale businesses, and I think all the way up to these billion-dollar stadiums. I mean, we just opened SoFi in LA. That's over $5 billion worth of construction. It's got performance venues. It's got outdoor public realm that's going to do so much for for LA. And in this project here, as I noted, all the components, and this is a great view because you're hovering over Globe Life Park, but we've begun to look. We started with laying down an infrastructure that master planned what this entire district could be, and even then it changes. So back to this idea of pivoting. So we may have laid out something in the beginnings of laying out Globe Life Field, but then Bob gets involved and his team starts to reshape and take what we had laid out in order to create possibly more developable lots that create and enhance the streetscape, that actually bring the scale down of these large scale venues that we create and make it more personal and more scalable to the pedestrian.
So Todd, if you'll just bring up that announcement from the news last December. This was the city of Arlington. They do have skin in the game, and they will own the convention center, the new convention center, with a 150,000 square foot of a convention space and 888 guest rooms. The largest ballroom, and this is interesting, I wanted to share this with you, but the large ballroom is 50,000 square foot. So I got to thinking, because it's always a struggle for me how to visualize that ballroom size. If you look at the football field, the square footage of a football field is 54,000 square feet. So the largest ballroom is basically the size of a football field. It's pretty awesome. And in thinking, looking at it in that context, I think that what you see here is you see in the foreground there the hotel, and I don't know, Todd, if you're driving, but if you could mouse over the hotel and the convention center, there you go. And then just to the right of that is the new parking garage that the city of Arlington owns and has funded, and that is going to open in December, within the next couple of weeks, actually, because one of the biggest challenges they had with all the new development and the Live by Lowe's and the like is parking. Parking is really restricted as we start to develop additional parcels there within the district. So that's a new garage that's coming online. There's a parcel that's in the foreground there, just to the left of the lake. That is a future either residential tower. Come on down, Todd, to the rectangle to the right of the stadium there. Yeah, there you go. So that's a developable parcel. There's been some discussion about doing a high-rise residential there, a tower, 20 or so story tower to reflect the height of the hotel. You know, can a residential hotel, high-rise residential tower, can it survive in Arlington? The development entity seems to think that's very possible, and they've done that in past developments that they've had. The biggest nut here is solving the problem of a Globe Life, the existing stadium, and what to do with it. And so this was a concept that HKS put together because it provides some residential within the stadium, the existing stadium bowl perimeters, and some office on the corner, what we call corner of Main and Main there at Randall Mill and Nolan Ryan Parkway. You'll see the office building, and that is probably a stretch to be able to develop that and build on top of the existing footprint of the stadium. But there's a lot of energy going into how that very beloved stadium can be repurposed into something that's timeless and continue to generate some financial viability for the overall structure itself. The left-hand corner was a concept which put some residential in that. I guess that would be the third baseline, probably less viable. And then one of the great announcements from earlier this year was the Medal of Honor Museum is now calling the district home, and they're currently designing and selecting contractors for that. That's off the screen, Todd. It's to the bottom there where it says Convention Center on the text. It's the old, Little League ballpark for Dr. Pepper is the site that's going to be developed on. And I don't know if you all knew that, but Arlington competed for that and they won that facility, and it's pretty exciting, and it's going to continue to develop the district's kind of prominence. To the opposite of Live by Lowe's, which is in the distance beyond the office building that we pointed out, is the development of residential and mixed use, which is the east side of the Nolan Ryan Plaza that fronts onto Fred Ortiz's building. That'd be a new parking garage, 19,000 spaces. That'd be residential rental and office. So we work kind of concept, which the developers proposed for that. That's been funded by the city. And then there's a parking lot where the mouse currently is that really has no purpose in the master plan that I know of, but it's a prime development opportunity for something in the future, as well as those lots to the east. So that's a really quick tour of the master plan and where it's going. Obviously, the AT&T Stadium is, when everything we've designed, we kind of focus on AT&T Stadium because that's the other part of this triangle, the two ball fields and then AT&T, and the views to the stadium are really priceless for us.
That's amazing. Maybe I'm a sucker for big mega projects and how beautiful they are, but great job, Fred and Bob. That's pretty cool. That Lowe's Hotel is beautiful, by the way. It gets a little covered up, but in those other images, man, that's a sharp looking project right there. Well, let's transition to, we heard, I don't know if you all heard Ryan Walsh say that recovery for him, he thinks is the May, and we're not going to hold him to it, although I might, May, June timeframe. Let's get our crystal balls out, warm them up, and each of you probably has a very different opinion, and I'd love to hear all of them. So crystal ball for when we see a full stadium and we're back to normal. Nobody wants to go first. I'm not going to call on you. You just got to pick.
I'm going with end of 21, approximately a year from now. Give everybody the opportunity to get the vaccine widely distributed and taken, see what the effects are, et cetera. So I think approximately a year.
It's incremental to me. So we just found out in Austin, of course, our vaccinations for healthcare workers are going to start this month. And in January, we expect to have full scale vaccinations for the rest of the public by fall. Now, it's a crystal ball, but it's incremental. So I think that larger scale events in Austin, live music is the heartbeat of who we are. And it's been devastating to our live music venues, to our musicians, and to everyone, as Lily and all others know in the creative class. But I think that we'll begin to see kind of those smaller scale. I think design, to Joni's question, is going to be outdoors. You have to have an outdoor space. I think going forward, I think that's going to be a must, but I do think that it's incremental. We'll see some things probably over the summer. For us, it'll be if ACL can happen in the fall of 2021. And if South by will come back, as opposed to being virtual in 21, come back 2022 March. So those are kind of our timeframes in thinking about recovery incrementally. I personally don't know. Obviously, I don't have a crystal ball, but that's kind of what we're thinking.
Molly, help me out. Did they announce that they're going to be virtual for South by Southwest for 21?
They announced 2021. Oh yeah, they announced this summer, probably September. It's all virtual 2021, which is of course devastating to us because it is part of who we all are and to our economy. But we're hoping that that will be something that's successful for them, because 2020, as you all know, I mean, we closed Austin the Friday before South by, and it was, I mean, it was tragic for all of us, because all of us have friends and relatives who are part of the whole South by family. And most
I remember that.
Yeah.
I was in Texas. We were giving Ryan Walsh's dad the Lifetime Achievement Award that week. It was miserable for everyone. And we thought it was going to end in like 2 weeks. What were we thinking? All right, who wants to go next?
I'll go next. I tend to concur with Jonathan and Molly that, especially that it will be somewhat a slow progress. I think that having seen, like, from the inside out, like these universities, for example, who tend to run into these COVID positive testing scenarios where as much as you want to get a 25% capacity in a stadium, I mean, in some cases, like Vanderbilt, for example, they didn't have any. They didn't want any fans in there, but in a moment's notice, they changed it to just family and friends. So it's small capacity. It's going to be influenced by whether it's a vaccine and when that shows up, but I think it'll be incremental. As much as I really want it to come as quickly as possible, I have a feeling that it will be maybe 2023. I'm just guessing that it's going to be a little while, and maybe the percentages might increase, but I think that there's still going to be a hesitancy that there is, even though the fan base, and remember earlier, I noted that there's not at least 95% of the fan base doesn't even make it to the stadium. They've never even been on campus, right? But there is a connection there. So I think that we're just going to have to understand that maybe filling out these stadiums and maybe these universities and or NFL venues, for example, might want to rethink their seating bowl and their premium offerings to where they can close off areas and create those outdoor open environments or terraces within a seating bowl and redefine the seating bowl.
I think once the restrictions and mandates from Texas, from the state are lifted, and depending on the effects of the vaccine or just the regular COVID rates, that'll make a huge difference and drive our ability to have more people at venues and more restaurants and more opportunities. So in San Antonio right now, they're really hesitant about putting back in some of those closures, restaurant closures, hoping that in 2 weeks when the vaccine rolls out and some of those effects are seen, that maybe they can just stave that off a little bit. So once we see that effect and then maybe some lifting of restrictions, that I think that'll help the ball go forward pretty much quicker.
For craft breweries, we're gonna, people are gonna slowly come out to the tap rooms, but we're really gonna be reliant on the restaurants and bars opening back up because so much of the revenue is from draft beer. So we're watching TRA, we're watching what the bars are doing and just, keeping our fingers crossed that starts to build back up.
We are certainly a mixed use development in the Arts District, and I agree with everyone. We're all dependent on each other. So if there's not in-person events in our cultural venues, then our restaurants suffer that are in the area and our retail suffers. And also the fact that not everyone's working from their offices hurts the entire economy as well. What I would say is I agree with certainly Fred and Jonathan. I look at the end of 2021 and more than likely 2022, when the performing arts venues or the museums were told that they could be 50%. It's different in the performing arts 50% capacity because the governor added restrictions in that it's every other row and at least 2 seats between parties. And when you do that, you can do a 50% capacity, but in terms of his idea is you can have up to 50% in the venue, but when you do the restrictions, it really is 30%. So certainly it's kind of a catch-22. Everyone needs the revenue, but now we're starting to learn how to maximize and monetize the virtual realm as well. So I look at 2022, and I certainly in the arts, we count on when Broadway shut down, which is a first, even during 9/11, that night they had shows on Broadway. And a lot of people went because they needed that healing, that release. But Broadway is not going to be up and running, even though they say they might by the end of 2021 summer. I don't think it's going to be up and running, and certainly not for touring until easily 2022. So that's my crystal ball.
So mine is this. I'm glad I got to see Hamilton on Broadway last Christmas. I was there. So I was lucky. I'm going to have some doom and gloom here. I don't ever think it's ever coming back. I think that here's what's going to happen. I think that other things are going to happen in the world that we're going to change forever. And if, let's say that we do all get well and it is okay, and I think we will see some of that. Zoom, what we're doing today has changed us forever. We don't need office space anymore like we needed. Outdoor is cheaper. People are going to make more money having less space. They're making changes. All of those things are changing. We're not going to want to go back. We're not going to put people back in offices anymore. That was already happening. And also, little towns are going to come back up again, smaller neighborhoods and little towns because of technology and the connection to the world with technology. And of course, technology is going to continue to change us. So I think what we see is never going to be again what we're thinking. If we're thinking we're going to just come back and start going to, I hope we get to go back to football stadiums again. I mean, my most special memories are being in the Cotton Bowl when it was small as a kid with my grandfather in November in the rain with a plastic bag, over our head watching a football game, and I think it was better then. And I think that's going to happen. I've been trying to get Dallas to downsize the Cotton Bowl back to like it was, at that time. But I think we're changed forever and it's not going back.
Well, I'm the host, so I get to go last. I think there's some pent up demand that's people like me, my kids were seniors last year. They didn't get to play their senior lacrosse season. They didn't get to have a graduation party. They didn't get to go to prom. And so when we had a grad party for them in August, we invited everyone in the world, and now we're shut down again. Man, I've got some plans for next summer, and I just feel like maybe I'm in a minority, but that minority, I believe, is going to grow. Like all of you said, at a pace, but I think that when it comes to consuming sports and things, it maybe was on a decline pre-COVID, but I think we're human beings. We love to get together. Zoom is neat and cool, and I love seeing all your faces and smiling and stuff, but it's not the same. I don't get to shake hands or bump elbows or say hello. So I'm all for. I think there's going to be a nice spike next summer of people that are ready and facilities that are ready and that have changed. But I'm optimistic, and I love the entrepreneurial stuff that Molly started us talking about. Does anybody have any final comments they want to add? We're a little bit over time, but this was I feel like this is a super panel of great minds, and I don't want to miss anything. So if you have something that you were dying to get out, that nugget that I can put on YouTube for the next 15 years, let's get that out right now, or say goodbye, whichever you want to do.
I'll go first. I want to say thank you and goodbye. But before I do, I have a quote that kind of summarizes a lot of what we've been touching on. It's short and sweet, but it was by Walt Disney. And when Molly's talking about entrepreneur and we're talking about pivoting in the future and all these variables in life, but times and conditions change so rapidly, we must keep our aim constantly focused on the future. So it's as simple as that. Take it any way you want, but again, small, large, 1 million, 5 billion. I mean, small community. I think technology, creating community, instilling that sense of connectedness will be key.
Thank you, Fred. That's awesome.
Tough to follow that. I mean, what else? How do you follow that?
We will always need, as a human being, we have three basic instincts: sex, security, and social. We have to continue on. That social is, I agree, Todd, social is a need. It's just gonna change. We have to have that. So the same is food, shelter, and clothing. We have to have social. I mean, we die off if we don't have it. So we do have to figure out ways to get it. As Fred says, nothing's got to stay the same. It's going to change.
I think you got your blurb right there. I mean, sex, social, that's great. I want to just reiterate gratitude. I think that we will come out of a pandemic a grateful society. And I'm hoping that leads to a lot of things that we think about when it comes to equity and inclusion, that we think about in the growth and development of our cities. We think about who we bring to the table and the voices that really matter. And I really think this is a real moment. And it is a generational shift. And when we look at how we look at generations and how we call millennials or Z, X, or Y, my grandson is 12 years old. And I do believe this is a moment in time that will change his life and our generations going forward forever. And I have to say that these are hard times for so many people. And I just feel so grateful at the same time. So my moment today, Todd, is gratitude. And I'm just really glad to be included because I learned a lot from everyone. And thank you.
Thank you all. It's been interesting to listen to other industries that I'm not a part of, but just to understand and feel the connection, and that we're all in the same boat, all trying to navigate these waters, go for the future. Very, very grateful to be able to participate today. And I also want to invite everybody down to the Riverwalk because we're outdoors and we socially distance.
I think that's great.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Oh, thanks, Lily. I think it's great, Maggie. I encourage everybody to get outside. And I think what's going to be most interesting, Todd, you talk about putting this on YouTube and things. I think everybody should come back, take a look at it 20 years from now, right? But because to Monty's point, everything's going to change, and we know that, and things will be different. But we'll look back 20 years and we won't think anything of it. It'll just be part of the way things are designed, the way people interact, and how we interact in our communities and how we build things, and whether there's green space or not, or the technology that's involved. I think the best thing will be to look back not 2 years from now, but 20 years from now, to see how this moment in time has actually changed society as a whole. And I think Monty's right. I mean, I think it will not be the same as it was 12 months ago.
But Molly's kids will be primed to pivot on a dime because they're
Right.
used to it.
I'd love it to be my kids, but I'm older than that. My grandkids.
That's right. And they'll be in the outdoor beer gardens all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Desperation.
I would
Desperation
agree.
is the mother of invention.
Exactly. I think that, first of all, I want to say thank you. And I've learned so much from each of the panelists. I want to make sure that we all stay connected, because this conversation was just the beginning. And I think that, I think what Molly said is that we are grateful. And what we've realized during this last 9 months, this year, and we look back on it, what we've realized is what our own individual quality of life needs are. And that's going to be different with each of us. But it's the one thing when we're sheltered at home, or we're a little bit more isolated than we used to be, that we now get down to the true foundation of what our needs are to live life. So I wish everyone well, and I wish I could see everyone on the call, but I hope I hope that we can stay connected. And Todd, thank you for bringing us together.
Todd, I guess I'd like to close with travel is a choice in the hospitality world, and heads in beds is really at this point in time an issue of confidence, because people no longer need to travel for work, and they no longer need overnight housing because of work as much. So unless there's confidence in the general public and they venture out and trust where they're headed and can get on an airplane, I think it's going to be a challenge for the next year. Thank you.
Do you feel like, Bob, I'm sorry, and I don't mean to keep talking because we're over time, but the efficacy of the vaccines to me is amazing. And what it tells me is the future of medical science, we may be able to solve other similar problems quicker, faster. A government can adapt and approve things faster and deliver things faster. Could we be coming into an era where their confidence increases in traveling because there's a support system of medical solutions?
I guess since you said Bob, I guess you're going to direct that to me, and I absolutely agree with that. I think that there has to be the will on the government side, and frankly, we're one big world, so many governments, right, all have to congeal around a common approach and solution. And I think we've seen that, and I think there's been the willingness, and politics aside on how we got to where we are, I think we're very close, and it's been a success.
Well, Charles, take us home, because it's beer 30. Okay, it's not quite yet, but it's got to be getting close.
I
What are
appreciate
your last thoughts?
and I appreciate hearing the interest in local craft beer. Has always been about community, about being small, and I Monty talking about the small places, outdoor space. That's definitely how we bring people together, and we have a beer. So I encourage you all, maybe not right now, but soon, go have a beer, pop one open, or go visit a tap room.
Yeah.
Monty, thank you for turning Maslow's hierarchy of needs on its ear and giving us a new #1 leader. I'll remember to add that to YouTube. Thank you, everybody. It's fantastic. Sorry for going over. Again, I'll put it on YouTube. I'll segment this out. I'll probably take some clips and make it fun. So just watch for your emails and that stuff coming out soon. And follow me in my show, Power 30. We have a weekly show. We have a newscaster from Houston who's awesome. And we're trying to adapt and get better for you all in video too. So thank you. Wonderful afternoon, wonderful weekend. Go vaccine.
Feel better, Monty.